I don't remember the exact moment I stopped being a man with a name and became just Dad. Maybe it was the first time I heated up a bottle at 3 a.m., one hand cradling a fevered forehead, the other flipping through bills I couldn't pay. Maybe it was when I started skipping meals so Jacob could eat. Maybe it happened slowly, like rust crawling over metal, or maybe I chose it. I suppose when you love someone that much, identity becomes secondary. You stop thinking about what you are and start thinking only about who they need you to be. We were never rich. We weren't even close. We lived in a one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat that never stopped humming. The walls were thin. The ceiling stained from winters that overstayed their welcome. I fixed what I could, ignored what I couldn't. Jacob slept on the pull-out couch. I took the floor most nights, but we laughed a lot. He had this smile, wide and toothy, crooked in the back like he never finished growing into it. When he was 6, he told me he wanted to be an inventor-astronaut president. I said, shoot for the moon. Just don't forget to call your old man from up there. He didn't grow up with much, but he grew up with someone who believed in him like it was a religion. When Jacob hit high school, things got serious. He had this fire in him, took every AP class they'd let him, argued with his teachers respectfully but fearlessly. He didn't just want A's, he wanted purpose. And I'll never forget the night he came home waving a test paper, eyes wild. Dad, my SAT scores, I might actually have a shot. We sat on the kitchen floor that night, the same linoleum I'd scrubbed clean 100 times with vinegar and hope, and we whispered about possibility. He said one word, Harvard. I nodded slowly, smiled. But inside, something shifted, not fear, not doubt, just math, the kind of math that doesn't lie. Room, board, tuition, books, travel, 4 years, more money than I'd seen in my entire life. But I didn't say that, I said. If they accept you, we'll find a way. He didn't ask how, he just believed me. And maybe that was the most dangerous part, how easily a child can believe in you when you're drowning. The letter came on a Tuesday, thick envelope, gold seal, addressed with his name in the clean serif font of prestige. I held it in my hands like it might burn through my fingers. He opened it slowly, careful, reverent. His eyes danced across the page. His mouth moved before sound came out, and then he looked at me and said 4 words that made everything worth it. Dad, I got in. I didn't cry, but something inside me folded. That night I stared at the ceiling and made decisions. 3 jobs. I would become the kind of man Harvard would never see so that my son could become the kind of man they'd never ignore. From that moment on, my life became a rotation of steel toes, bleach fumes and exhaustion, but I wore it like armor. He would go to Harvard. He would walk their halls. He would belong. And I would be the ghost who paid the light bill. There's something strange that happens when your child starts to outgrow the life you gave them. You don't notice it at first. It comes in small shifts. The way they pause before introducing you to someone, the way they stop asking you to come to school events, the way their language starts changing, borrowing accents from places you've never been. It's not malice, not even shame, not yet. It's just distance. And if you're a parent who spent your whole life trying to give them wings, you don't clip them. You just nod and watch them fly, even if they never look back. Jacob's acceptance to Harvard lit a fire under me. I didn't sleep that first week. I sat at the kitchen table with a yellow notepad and wrote out every expense I could think of: tuition, housing, textbooks, meal plans, winter clothes for Boston. Then I circled the number at the bottom, underlined it twice, and added plus emergencies. It was more than I'd made in the last decade, so I got to work, real work. The kind that doesn't come with business cards or weekends off. Job 1, night security at a paper mill that hadn't updated its machinery since the '70s. It smelled like ink and dust, and the pipes groaned like old men. Job 2, janitorial staff at a commercial office building, bathrooms, break rooms, trash disposal. Job 3, weekends at a hand wash car service. Tips only. If it rained, I earned nothing. I kept spreadsheets on paper, paid in cash, hid most of it in a locked drawer because I didn't trust banks and I sure didn't trust luck. I worked 7 days a week, 18 hours a day, and I told no one, especially not Jacob. He called now and then, short calls. "Hey Dad, just checking in. Classes are tough but good." Yeah, I made some friends. Never once did he ask how I was, but I didn't mind. Because every word he spoke from those ivy-covered dorms across thousands of miles of dreams reminded me why I kept going. Then one day I got a picture, a text message, just a photo, no caption. It was Jacob standing in front of a Harvard building. The bricks behind him were older than our entire family tree. He wore a crimson sweatshirt. The logo sat proudly across his chest. His hair was trimmed, his eyes looked sharper. He looked different, older, polished, almost like someone had taken my boy and rebranded him. Still, I smiled for hours. I showed it to everyone at the car wash that day, even a grumpy old man with cigarette teeth and a dripping bumper. "That's my son," I said. "Harvard man." He nodded but didn't say anything. Didn't have to. That night I stared at that photo like it was a window into another world. A world I had helped build brick by brick but where I wasn't invited. And somewhere, buried under the pride, something small and sharp stirred in me. A question I couldn't shake. When he tells people his story, does he mention me? Love doesn't disappear with a bang. Sometimes it just stops returning your calls. I used to keep a log, a small notepad near the rotary phone in the kitchen. Every time Jacob called, I'd jot it down. August 22nd, 7:43 p.m. Asked how I was, said dining hall food is awful. September 3rd, 10:17 a.m. Just checking in. Midterm soon. Little things, nothing big, but when you're a parent and your house is empty, you measure your weeks by those calls. At first they came every few days, then once a week, then silence. I told myself he was busy. That's what you do when you love someone. You create excuses for their absence so your heart doesn't cave in under the truth. But the notepad didn't lie. I called once. Just once. It was a Sunday, raining. My feet still ached from a double shift, and the stovetop was hissing where a cheap pot boiled water for pasta. I let the phone ring 5 times, then 6, finally a click, then the polite voice of a machine. "Hey, it's Jacob, can't come to the phone right now, you know what to do." I didn't leave a message, I just hung up and stared at the receiver like it had failed me somehow. Then I crossed the call out in the notepad. No answer. A week later he texted. "Sorry Dad, been slammed with work, call you soon." He never did. You start noticing things after a while, like how your name is no longer listed in his email signature, or how his social media says from Boston, as if his childhood had been erased. He didn't ask how my week was. He didn't ask if I was eating okay. He didn't ask if the furnace was still leaking gas in the winter. And the funny thing, I wasn't angry. I was just invisible, edited out, like a footnote that no longer serves the narrative. One night I dreamt of him as a boy. In the dream, he was 6 again, holding a paper crown from Burger King, sitting in my lap at a bus stop while I read Charlotte's Web out loud. I woke up at 2:14 a.m., heart pounding, palms empty. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that hums like sorrow. I went to the kitchen, opened the notepad, and stared at the last entry. November 10, no call. I closed it, put the pen away, and that was the last time I kept track. Because at some point, you stop waiting for the phone to ring and start wondering when you became the burden. Sometimes rejection doesn't sound like go away. Sometimes it sounds like you really don't need to trouble yourself. And that's the most dangerous kind, the kind that dresses up cruelty as kindness. It was early spring when he finally reached out. A short text. "Hey Dad, spring showcase coming up. Not a big deal. You don't have to come or anything, just FYI. I read that message twice. Then a third time. It wasn't what he said, it was what he didn't say. There was no "would love to have you." No, it'd mean a lot if you came. Not even a "how are you," just a heads up like a weather forecast. Rain coming. Dad not needed. I remember sitting in the break room at the car wash, the message still glowing on my cracked phone screen. One of the younger guys, Julio, leaned over and said, "Your boy inviting you to something." I smiled faintly. Not exactly, and I tucked the phone back into my chest pocket like it was too fragile to show. That weekend I took a bus. He said not to come, but I went anyway. 3 transfers, a half-day's pay lost, but I showed up like I always had. I stood in the back of the campus auditorium, unnoticed, unannounced. I wore my best shirt, which, if I'm being honest, still had bleach stains near the hem. I sat on the far right aisle where no one would see me. The room buzzed with proud parents, silk blouses, DSLR cameras, fresh manicures. You could smell ambition in the air. I smelled like hand soap and fatigue. Jacob was on stage giving a presentation with 2 other students. He wore a blazer I'd never seen before, hair slicked back. He was confident, charming, like a man rehearsed in a mirror of money and expectations. And when it ended, the applause was thunderous. I clapped too, quietly, palms rough, calloused, still clapping for a boy who no longer saw me. Outside in the sun, I waited near a row of cherry blossom trees. When he finally emerged, surrounded by peers, I stepped forward, not to interrupt, just to wave. He saw me. I know he did, just for a moment. His eyes flicked in my direction, then away. He leaned in toward the girl beside him and whispered something. She laughed. And then they turned their backs and walked away. I didn't follow. I just stood there a while, pretending I was waiting for someone else. Pretending I hadn't come hundreds of miles just to be uninvited in person. Eventually, I caught a bus home, window seat, hands in my lap, watching the world blur by like a story I was no longer written into. Back home, I wrote a letter, not to him, to myself. "You raised a man who shines in public, even if it means he leaves you in the dark. That's still a kind of success, isn't it?" I folded the letter, put it in a drawer, next to the others, because by now I had a drawer full of unsent thoughts, and a heart full of unsaid things. Some wounds aren't carved by knives. They're typed, with 2 thumbs, in silence. And you only see them if you're unlucky enough to look at the wrong time, or maybe the right time. It was a Thursday night. I was on my second shift, mopping floors in an office building with windows too big for a city too small. My phone buzzed, an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't pick up. "Dad, can you check my room? I think I left my laptop charger in the drawer." Jacob. His voice was flat, hurried, like I was a last-minute favor, not family. Still, I said, "Sure, son." Because when a father hears Dad, even after weeks of silence, it's like rain in a desert. I got home just before midnight. My back hurt. I smelled like bleach. My hands were trembling from a lack of sleep and too much cheap coffee. I opened the drawer. No charger. But there, under a stack of old papers, was his backup phone, the one I'd given him 2 years earlier before he left for Boston. It was off, probably forgotten, but something told me to plug it in. I don't know why, curiosity, or maybe something deeper. A father's instinct, that whisper in the blood when something isn't right. It booted up, no passcode, still synced to his iCloud, and that's when I saw it. A conversation from just a week earlier, between him and someone saved as Emily H. Jacob, yeah, I'll introduce you to Mom next time you're in town. Emily, what about your dad? Will he be there too? Jacob, probably not. We're not that close. He's just a janitor anyway. Just a janitor. 4 words, that's all it took. My knees buckled before the emotion did. I sat down on the edge of his old bed, the one I built with my own hands when he was 10, and I stared at that screen like it had just spat on me. Just a janitor. Funny, isn't it? How one word can erase 3 jobs. How one sentence can rewrite a lifetime. He didn't say, my dad works hard. He didn't say he sacrificed everything for me. He didn't even say he raised me alone. No, he said I was just a janitor, like I was a stain he couldn't scrub off his biography. I didn't cry. Tears are for people who still expect love. What I felt was quieter, heavier, like being buried in a room where your name has been painted over. I powered off the phone, put it back in the drawer. Then I sat in the dark with only the hum of the fridge for company and asked myself a question I never thought I'd need to. Is it possible to love someone and be ashamed of them at the same time? The answer came not as words, but in memories, of hands rubbed raw from winter soap, of boots soaked through from night shifts, of birthday cakes baked in silence, eaten alone because he had study group. And I realized the shame wasn't mine. It never was. There's a kind of betrayal that doesn't scream. It whispers in curated biographies, in smiling introductions, in stories told just loud enough for you not to be included. I wasn't angry, not yet. I had raised Jacob to be ambitious, to speak well, to present himself with confidence. What I hadn't realized was that he had also learned something else: how to edit, how to polish the truth until it gleamed like marble, even if that meant chiseling away the parts that didn't fit. A week after reading the message, he's just a janitor anyway, I started noticing patterns, small things. On his LinkedIn profile, the About Me section said he was raised in a hard-working, business-minded family. No mention of a single parent, no mention of working-class anything. On his Instagram, there were photos of him in libraries, coffee shops, Boston rooftops, study sessions with friends, captions like, "From corner office to capstone. Thanks to my mentor, you know who you are." But I didn't. I didn't know who that was supposed to be. It sure wasn't me. I heard from an old friend of his, Maria, sweet girl. She used to ride her bike with Jacob after school when they were 9. She called me out of the blue one day. She had bumped into Jacob at a tech conference, told him she knew his dad. She said he smiled, but it was strange, like I'd brought up something he wasn't ready to explain. He told her I lived out of state now and that I'd retired early from managing a chain of stores, that I was always working but doing fine. She said it like it was a compliment, like he was protecting me, but I didn't feel protected. I felt erased. I wasn't a manager. I never owned a chain of anything. I cleaned up after people. I swept up broken glass. I worked through migraines and back pain and unpaid overtime. And I did it all so he wouldn't have to lie, but maybe that's the cruelest part. Maybe he had to lie not because of what I was, but because of how that reflected on what he wanted to be. It made sense now, all of it. Why he never invited me to campus. Why he ignored my messages when I said I wanted to visit. why he always said, "Let's FaceTime next week," and never called. It wasn't distance. It wasn't busyness. It wasn't forgetting. It was shame, wrapped in ambition, dressed in silence. I sat in my apartment, staring at a photo of us from 10 years earlier, Jacob in a Halloween costume, sitting on my shoulders, smiling with a crooked tooth and a candy bag too full to carry. Back then, he used to say, "That's my dad, he's strong like Hulk." Now, I wasn't strong. I wasn't even there, so I did something strange that night. I went to the mirror. I looked at myself, really looked. The creases around my eyes, the gray in my beard, the tired weight in my shoulders, and I said out loud, "You may not be the man your son talks about, but you're still the man who paid for his dreams." And I stood there, not proud, not angry, just grounded. Because while Jacob was busy crafting a perfect story, I was still living the true one. Some men build legacies with buildings or books or plaques with their names on them. Others build them with calloused hands, silent bank transfers, and the courage to be unseen. This chapter is about the second kind. It started with a letter, plain envelope, no return address, stamped with the Harvard crest. At first I thought it was another fundraising flyer. I almost tossed it, but something about the weight of the paper made me pause. Inside was a formal letter. Crisp, expensive, addressed not to Jacob but to me. "Dear Mr. Reynolds, we are reaching out in gratitude and admiration. Over the last 3 years, your anonymous contributions to the Mather Foundation Fund have directly supported 41 underprivileged students across 4 departments. Your quiet generosity has not gone unnoticed. While we understand your request to remain unnamed, we would like to extend an invitation to our donors' breakfast during commencement week. It would be an honor to thank you in person. Sincerely, Office of Advancement, Harvard University." I read that letter 5 times. 41 students, me, just me. The numbers were correct. The deposits I'd made monthly from all 3 jobs, sometimes just a few hundred, sometimes 1,000, all under the name R. Trust. I had opened it years ago with the help of a friend at the bank. Never used my full name. I didn't want the recognition. I just wanted to help, because I remembered what it felt like to have nothing. And because deep down I was still trying to rewrite one boy's story, even if he no longer wanted me in it. I never told Jacob. I didn't want his thanks. I wanted his life to be bigger than mine. But now, for the first time, I wondered, has he ever walked past a kid who stayed in school because of me and never knew it? That week, I thought long and hard about attending the donors' breakfast. Part of me said no. He wouldn't want me there. He might not even acknowledge me. But another voice, quieter, older, sturdier, whispered something I hadn't heard in a long time. "This is not about him. This is about you." So I marked the date, circled it on the wall calendar with a red pen. Commencement week, donor breakfast, 7:30 a.m., May 23rd, the same week Jacob would graduate, the same stage he might stand on, the same campus that erased me, now inviting me back. Not as Jacob's father, not as just a janitor, but as someone who had shaped futures quietly, consistently, without applause. That night I opened the drawer where I kept the letters I never sent. I pulled out the first one I ever wrote to him. It said, "No matter where you go or who you become, I'll always be proud to stand behind you, even if you don't want me in the photo." I folded it, took a deep breath, and for the first time in a long time, I started feeling like I still mattered. History remembers the ones who speak on stage, but it forgets the ones who cleaned it the night before. This is the story of the man who did both. But only one of those moments ever got a spotlight. May 22nd, the night before commencement. The city was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes everything echo just a little longer than it should. Streetlights flickered. Steam curled from grates. And inside the Harvard Alumni Hall, the only sound was the soft scrape of a mop dragging across the tile. That mop was mine. I didn't wear a suit. I wore blue coveralls with my name stitched on the pocket, Ray. Nobody there knew me as Mr. Reynolds. Nobody knew I was the man they'd invited to speak at the donor breakfast. To them, I was a shadow passing through after hours, the cleanup guy, the invisible gear that makes the polished machine run. And that was fine. I'd lived in that space all my life, silent, reliable, ignored. The hall was massive, gold chandeliers, velvet banners, rows of white linen-covered tables with name cards tucked neatly on each plate. I saw names I recognized from newspapers, tech moguls, senators, billionaire parents, legacies. Then I saw my own. A simple place card, R. Trust. That was me. Table 4, seat 2. Right near the stage, I laughed quietly. It felt like a joke told by fate. I had just finished scrubbing the stage floor, bent over on one knee when the fatigue hit me. I hadn't eaten all day. I'd worked a double shift, then caught the night train into Boston, then walked 2 miles to the venue. I told myself I'd rest when I got home. I told myself I was fine, but my body had other plans. My knees buckled first. Then my vision blurred. The chandelier lights above me twisted like halos underwater. And then I collapsed, right there on the floor I had just made spotless. I don't know how long I was out, maybe 10 minutes, maybe an hour. When I opened my eyes, I saw shoes, polished ones. Someone had found me. A young woman knelt beside me, clipboard in hand, headset on. "Sir, are you okay? You shouldn't be here this late. Maintenance is supposed to clock out by 7. I tried to speak. My throat was dry. She offered me water and helped me sit up. "Can I call someone for you?" I shook my head. Then I pointed to the stage and rasped, "I'm supposed to be up there tomorrow morning." She tilted her head, confused. Then I pulled the invitation from my chest pocket, crumpled, stained, but still legible. Her eyes widened. She looked from the card to me, then back to the card. You're the R. Trust donor." I nodded, and for the first time in years someone saw me, really saw me, not as a janitor, not as an afterthought, but as the man who had been carrying the weight of other people's dreams quietly all along. She helped me to my feet. "Mr. Reynolds will have someone escort you tomorrow, properly." I nodded again, said nothing. Because in that moment I didn't need applause, I just needed rest. And maybe a chair. That night I slept in a rented motel 10 minutes away. The bed was lumpy, the air stale, but I slept like a man who had nothing left to prove. Because in less than 12 hours I would return to that same stage, not with a mop, but with a microphone. It's funny how we speak about people who raised us when we think they are not around to hear it. Commencement morning. The campus buzzed with nerves and pride. Parents in suits and dresses, sons and daughters in caps and gowns, camera flashes, hugs too tight, perfume and cologne mixing with spring flowers. And there was Jacob, center of it all. He looked the part. Crimson sash, honors cord, hair perfect, smile brighter than I'd seen in years. To anyone watching, he was the golden boy. I watched him from afar, seated behind a curtain, waiting to be called on stage for the donor speech. A man hidden in plain sight. He was standing with a group of friends. Beside him, a girl with brown curls and a camera slung around her shoulder. Emily, I guessed. She was scanning the crowd. "Jacob, which one's your dad? I want to get a photo of you too." Jacob glanced around, then gave a soft shrug and a quick reply. "He's not here. He's busy, out of state." Then he laughed a little. "It's fine, it's just easier this way." Easier, as if being erased was a courtesy, as if I was the complication, the stain on the polished resume, the footnote better left out. I didn't flinch, didn't storm out, didn't shout his name. I just folded my hands and looked down at the speech I was holding, 3 pages long, printed in 14-point font for my tired eyes. And I whispered to myself, "You're here. Ray, you're exactly where you're meant to be." They began seating the donors. I was escorted to the front of the stage. The announcer's voice rang out across the lawn. "Before our commencement speaker, we would like to begin with a short address from one of our most generous and until recently anonymous benefactors." The audience fell quiet. "Please welcome the R.R. Trust donor Raymond Reynolds." I stood, walked slowly to the podium. Every eye turned to me, including Jacob's, and in that one frozen moment, he realized some truths aren't shouted. They're simply revealed, like pulling back a curtain to show the actor was the playwright all along. The applause was polite, reserved. No one recognized the name Raymond Reynolds. Why would they? To them, I was just another old man with thinning hair and scuffed shoes, stepping cautiously to the microphone with folded paper in hand. But to me, that stage wasn't a spotlight. It was a reckoning. I looked out across the crowd, parents, students, faculty, media, and near the third row I saw him, Jacob, sitting perfectly still. His eyes locked on mine, expression frozen somewhere between shock and shame. I began, "Good morning, I won't take much of your time. I know you're all eager to celebrate today. I'm not an alumnus. I didn't graduate from here. I didn't even finish college. I'm a janitor, a night guard, a man who's worked more holidays than he's had off." Murmurs, shifts in seats. I heard a cough, a quiet chuckle of disbelief. But I'm also someone who believes deeply that education should never belong only to those who can afford it. That brilliance exists in places where privilege doesn't reach. I unfolded the second page. "Over the last few years, I've been proud to contribute quietly to the Mather Foundation Fund. It wasn't much at first, a little scraped from 3 paychecks here and there. But over time, it added up. And today, I've had the privilege of supporting 41 students who walk these halls." Gasps now, heads turning. I looked back at Jacob. One of them is sitting out there right now. He doesn't know he was on my list. Doesn't know that I've been behind his tuition since the day he got his acceptance letter. He probably doesn't want to know, because he thinks I'm just a janitor. Dead silence. You could feel the collective breath being held as if no one dared move. And maybe I am, but I'm also something else. I'm his father. A stillness fell over the crowd. Jacob's face pale, no applause, not yet, just truth, raw and wide open. I never wanted recognition, never asked for his gratitude. All I ever wanted was to see him fly. But I think it's important that we all remember, no matter how high you climb, never forget the hands that built the ladder. I stepped back from the mic. For a second, no one knew what to do. Then a single clap, then 2. Then the entire auditorium stood up, not in a standing ovation of spectacle, but of respect. Real, heavy, earned. I didn't look back at Jacob. I didn't need to. That wasn't my moment to explain. It was his moment to understand. Not all punishment comes in the form of anger. Sometimes the sharpest consequence is a room full of people looking at you and knowing what you did. Jacob didn't move, not when the applause started, not when the man he'd called just a janitor walked off stage. Not even when his classmates turned toward him, some with surprise, some with pity, one or two with raised eyebrows that silently said, "That's your dad." He sat there. Third row, center seat. Crimson sash wrinkled, hands clenched in his lap, breath shallow. He couldn't look up, because the moment he did, he'd have to admit it, that was his father. The man he had scrubbed from every version of his story. The man who mopped floors while he chased honor cords. The man who'd paid for all of it. Emily leaned toward him, whispering, "Jake, did you know?" He didn't answer. What could he say? "Yes, that's my dad. I lied about him to make myself look better. Or maybe I forgot who he was because I wanted to forget where I came from." He wanted the earth to open beneath his chair. After the ceremony, people swarmed the speaker. My father, Raymond Reynolds. Jacob watched from the side as students who had once ignored him now shook his father's hand. Parents thanked him. Deans praised him. One professor said, "Your words meant more than any honorary degree." The man Jacob had hidden for 4 years was now the one person everyone wanted to know, and still he couldn't walk up, couldn't say anything, not "I'm sorry," not "thank you," not even "that was beautiful." He just stood there, watching, remembering. He remembered the lunchboxes, the nights his dad fell asleep at the table, the old boots with duct tape on the toe, the scar on his hand from fixing the water heater in winter just so Jacob could shower before school. He remembered and hated himself for forgetting. At one point his father turned toward him. Their eyes met. Jacob expected disappointment, anger, even just sadness, but there was none, only stillness and something worse than any scolding, dignity. His father looked at him like a man who had already let go, who didn't need revenge, who had spoken his truth, and was at peace with whatever came next. Jacob took a step forward, then stopped. He wanted to run to him, to say everything, to rewind 4 years of shame and rewrite it all in one embrace. But that's not how real life works. So instead, he stood still and watched his father walk away. The strange thing about truth is that it travels slow, but when it arrives, it echoes. The day after the commencement speech, the video clip went viral. It wasn't meant to. A student had recorded it on her phone, just a shaky front-row shot of an older man in a wrinkled shirt, standing at a podium, saying things that felt too honest to be rehearsed. She uploaded it with a simple caption, "The janitor who paid for 41 Harvard students, including his own son, and asked for nothing." By noon, it had 1 million views. By evening, it was on every platform. Anonymous benefactor revealed to be campus custodian. Harvard humbled by quiet hero. Working-class father funds Ivy League dreams in silence. And somewhere in the shadows of all that praise, Jacob sat in his apartment, refreshing his feed, watching the man he thought he'd buried beneath his ambition rise. Journalists reached out, TV networks called, scholarship recipients posted emotional thank you videos. One student wrote, "I stayed in school because of someone I never met. Now I know his name, Mr. Reynolds. You didn't just fund my degree, you gave me the chance to believe in humanity again." Another, "I was going to drop out sophomore year. Your money kept me going, but your speech, that made me want to be someone worth thanking." There was even talk of naming a fund after him, the Reynolds Resilience Grant, to honor students with working-class roots, students who know what it means to build dreams in the dark. Meanwhile, Jacob, the son who once bragged about independence, received no calls, no interviews, no emails asking him to comment. He became invisible. The same way he'd made his father. He walked into a coffee shop 2 days later and heard 2 students talking about the speech. "That guy, Mr. Reynolds, total legend. Right, Can you imagine your dad doing something like that? Jacob almost said, "Yeah, he's my dad," but he didn't because he hadn't earned the right, not yet. Back home, he sat at his desk and stared at his laptop. He opened a new email to Raymond Reynolds, RR Trust at ProtonMail.com. Subject Dad, then paused. He stared at the blinking cursor for an hour. He didn't hit send. Instead, he picked up his phone and replayed the speech. Again and again and again. Each word a mirror, each pause a memory, each line a quiet reminder of who he used to be and who his father still was. Praise is loud, but absence is louder. The mail started coming on the fourth day. Thick envelopes with return addresses from California, Montana, Vermont, typed letters, handwritten notes, postcards from students, teachers, even janitors from other states who saw themselves in the speech. Mr. Reynolds, I'm a single father working nights at a hospital kitchen. You reminded me that my sacrifices are not wasted. You gave to people you didn't know. That's real love. That's real legacy. My dad was a janitor too. I never told anyone until now. The email inbox filled up too. Subject lines like, "Thank you for believing in people like me. You changed my life without knowing it. Can I call you Dad too?" Each message was like a warm fire lit in the corner of a cold room. Each one softened something in his chest, but not a word from Jacob. No text, no call, no "Hey, can we talk?" The silence had shape, it had weight. It wasn't just that Jacob hadn't apologized. It was that he hadn't even acknowledged what had happened. Like maybe if he stayed quiet long enough, the world would move on and the echo would fade. But echoes don't fade when they come from your own blood. Ray sat by the window with a mug of black coffee, same chipped cup he'd used for years. He opened each letter one by one. He smiled. He nodded. He cried. Once, but always he ended by checking his phone. Still no messages. Still nothing from the boy he used to carry on his shoulders through snowstorms. One day he pulled out an old photo album. Inside, a picture of Jacob at age 5 in a Batman costume. A drawing Jacob once made of my hero, my dad. A graduation photo, the one Ray took from the back of the crowd, zoomed in, blurry but proud. He placed one of the new letters inside the album, a note from a student he'd never met who wrote, "You didn't raise me, but you raised the bar for what a father should be." That night, Ray wrote a letter, not to the world, not to the press, to Jacob. "I don't need your apology, son. I just need your truth. Say it out loud, if not to me, then to yourself. Who built your ladder? He didn't send it. He folded it. Put it in the drawer with all the others, because some things a father writes just to get them out of his chest. Not every story ends with a grand gesture. Sometimes all it takes is a knock." It was a quiet Sunday, the kind of quiet you don't notice until something breaks it. Raymond Reynolds was sitting in his chair by the window, the one with the sun-warmed cushion and the worn-down armrest where his elbow had lived for 20 years. He was reading one of the letters again, this one from a girl in Atlanta who had used his scholarship to become the first in her family to attend college. She signed it. "You gave me a future. I hope someone gives you peace." He folded it, smiled faintly, and reached for his cup of cold coffee. That's when it came. 3 soft knocks. He looked up. Nobody ever knocked. Neighbors didn't visit. Delivery men just left packages by the door. For a moment, he just sat there frozen. Then slowly, carefully, he stood. His knees ached. His chest tightened, not from fear, but from recognition. He knew who it was before he even turned the knob. When he opened the door, Jacob was standing there, no camera crew, no apology rehearsed. Just his son, older, thinner, tired in a way ambition can't fix, and holding something in both hands, a small box, cardboard, taped shut. "Hey, Dad." The words came out awkward, small, like a boy's voice trying to fit in a man's mouth. Ray didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Jacob looked down at the box. "It's old stuff, pictures, letters, some of your tools I borrowed and never gave back." "I've been meaning to." He stopped, exhaled, shook his head. "No, that's not true. I haven't been meaning to. I've been avoiding this. You." Silence, the kind that doesn't demand to be filled. Finally, Jacob looked up. "I watched your speech 100 times. Everyone kept asking what it meant to me. I told them I didn't know how to answer that." He swallowed. "But I do now." He paused again, then whispered, "It means I've got a lot of making up to do." Ray didn't move, didn't smile, didn't nod, but his eyes softened, and his hand, the one that had pushed brooms, scrubbed floors, carried dreams, reached out, just enough, and Jacob stepped forward. They didn't hug, they didn't cry, but they stood there, two men, one blood, one truth, one beginning again. Not all healing needs to be loud. Sometimes it sounds like a pan sizzling, or the scratch of an old paintbrush, or the silence between two people that no longer feels empty. Jacob stayed the night, not because they talked it through, not because things were fixed, but because he didn't leave, and that for now was enough. In the morning, Ray woke up first like he always had. He stood by the stove pouring batter into an old cast-iron pan. The smell of vanilla and butter filled the kitchen, soft and familiar, like a song hummed under breath. Jacob shuffled in, still wearing the same clothes, hair messy, face tired. Ray didn't say good morning. He just pointed to the chair. "Still take yours with peanut butter." Jacob nodded, smiled. "Yeah, I forgot you remembered that." "I didn't forget anything," Ray said softly. They ate in silence, 2 plates, 2 mugs of coffee, black, no sugar, the same way they used to years ago, before Harvard, before shame, before silence. After breakfast, Jacob stood by the wall in the hallway, the one with faded photos and peeling paint. "This still need fixing." Ray looked up, been meaning to get around to it. Jacob shrugged off his jacket, rolled up his sleeves. "Let's do it." They didn't talk much while they worked. Just music playing softly from an old radio. Ray stirred the paint. Jacob held the ladder. Every now and then they'd switch places. Jacob didn't ask for forgiveness. Ray didn't offer it, but somewhere between the strokes of the brush and the smell of fresh paint, something began to mend. At one point, Jacob paused. "Do you still have the letters?" Ray didn't answer immediately. He pointed to the drawer in the corner, the one Jacob used to avoid. Jacob opened it. Inside, dozens of folded letters, every speech, every newspaper article, every photo of him growing up. And at the very top, the graduation program. He stared at it, ran his hand over the paper, then whispered, "I thought you threw this stuff away." Ray wiped his hands on an old rag. "I don't throw people away." The room was quiet again, but this time it felt safe. They kept painting, not to erase the past, but to cover what had faded. Together, some things don't need to be said out loud. Some forgiveness lives in the way you show up, in the way you carry groceries without being asked, in the way you stay for breakfast instead of leaving after dinner. A few weeks passed. Jacob still visited on Sundays. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they just worked on fixing things around the apartment. Sometimes they didn't do anything at all, but he came. And sometimes that's more than enough. One afternoon, Ray sat at the kitchen table, that same wobbly-legged table that had survived takeout nights, spilled coffee, homework, and 30 years of real life. He wrote a letter, not for Jacob, not for the world, but for anyone who's ever given everything. only to be forgotten, to the parent whose name isn't on the award but paid for the entry fee, to the father who stood at the back of the room, to the mother who skipped dinner so their child wouldn't, to the ones who were left off the thank you list, the yearbook caption, the speech on stage. You don't need them to say it. You don't need the microphone. Your love was never loud, but it was built to last. And when the applause fades, your legacy remains. He folded the paper, placed it in the drawer, the same one filled with other letters never sent, then looked up and saw Jacob quietly washing dishes. No words, no grand moment, just a son staying. And for the first time in a long time, Raymond Reynolds leaned back, closed his eyes, and exhaled, not because he was finished, but because he was finally seen. Not every hero stands in the spotlight. Some of them hold it steady so others can shine. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember. Respect doesn't beg, and love, real love, never disappears. Thank you for watching. This is Revenge Files, and some truths are best told slowly.